Okay, so we are recording. Okay.
Sorry, Patrick, can you please put off your sound? Thank you, sir.
Okay. All right, I'm just going to share my screen as well with our slideshow. We'll be jumping between our presentation slides and the actual live version of the application. I would advise anybody, if you do have critical questions that you want to raise, feel free to do so. If it can wait until the end, that would be preferred. But we'll try and rush through all of the content as quickly as we can and leave enough time for Q&A afterwards. Okay, so I am just sharing my screen. Let's keep it simple. Can you someone just confirm that you can see the screen?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
Sure, thank you. Okay,
Yes,
so
Yes,
thank you. Okay, so yes, I think I think just we do have quite a few new individuals joining that couldn't make some of the first session, and I know Patrick has given you some of the rundown, so I won't get stuck on the whole introduction or too much. But please, again, if you do have any further questions, or share the slides afterwards as well, you're welcome to put forward any questions about Mci IT, etc. So yes, the reason we're all here is for everybody to become more familiar with Mci IT's cloud solutions suite, what it does, what it includes, who it's for, and the potential that we see for it, further potential out there in the market, and the gaps that it tend to fill. Some basic information about Mci IT. I'm not going to cover that in all too much and so forth, but you can refer to that in the slides as well. I think of just a reminder and significance, to consider. We service a variety of technical industries. I think that is the underlying theme. These are very technical environments, so industries that we serve include civil engineering, construction, chemical and microbiology, medical, pharmaceutical, manufacturing, quality assurance, agricultural, water, mining, metallurgical, and general testing environments as well. Our customers range from international, local, as well as state-owned entities.
Yeah, sorry, Vian, if you may just put it in the presentation mode. I think we still seeing come up off the slide. If you can just put it in presentation mode, yeah. Thanks.
I can do so. Is that better for you?
Yes, it is. Thanks. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. So yes, as you can see, these are some examples of some of our customers and what we do for them. You'll see quite a range of national institutes, for instance, a lot of engineering environments, and you'll see it's a mix of laboratory information. It's a laboratory-based environments. Asset or equipment, plant-based or process management environments as well, and that is essentially what CSS or our cloud solution suite, the kind of customers that it tends to service. So yes, you'll obviously refer to the rest in the slides as well, but this gives a good idea of the kind of customers we serve and what we do for them, and the general underlying theme. In terms of regulatory approvals, these are just some examples of the standards that our customers are subject to, that we obviously have to ensure that our systems adhere to as well. Okay, so I think onto the real reason that we're all here for. Mci IT's cloud solution suite, it consists of 3 modules essentially. The first is it's a LIMS module. It's LIMS, short for Laboratory Information Management System, and as you can imagine, it is directed towards laboratory environments. Now, laboratories can occur obviously as standalone commercial testing entities. They can be in the form of internal QA departments in manufacturing and processing environments. So yes, laboratories definitely, you'll find laboratories in many different structures and so forth, whether it's as standalone or subdivisions of larger organizations. So is it just targeted towards laboratories? No, definitely not. That's just one of the modules, because as most other organizations still has to do quality management in terms of especially ISO 9001, 17025 is the ISO standard that general testing laboratories have to adhere to, and ISO 15189 is slightly different, but still similar to 17025, and that is more relevant to medical and pharmaceutical laboratories. But at the end of the day, they're all very much the same, and you have to manage quality for very much the same items as well. There's just some slight technical differences, but our quality management module caters for all of those. And then thirdly, we have the asset management module, which applies to most organizations. You have assets and you have equipment that need to be maintained, serviced, etc. However, of key significance of our asset management module is that it incorporates a lot more technical elements as well that you wouldn't find in other commercial ERP or asset management systems that focus more on the financial aspect of assets, whereas we bring with or incorporate technical management as well. Where we incorporate, we link that to the quality management aspects, to the laboratory information management aspects, allow for manuals, technical management, inspections, maintenance, work orders of all different kinds, and so forth. And I think also to take into account that assets are generally defined as on the principle of a financial value. So some would, on accounting standards, would define anything above a certain value as an asset, and anything below that would be written off immediately. So general commercial asset management modules aren't able to provide the functionality for items that aren't classified as financial assets, but on which organizations still have to apply the same level of technical management in order to still obtain the end goal of managing all assets, instruments, equipment effectively and in the same manner. A typical example of that would, for instance, be take a laboratory that can have a $3 million analyzer, maybe not $3 million, but let's say a $300,000 analyzer machine. It's a financial asset that requires calibrations, services, technical management, and so forth. So compare that to a volumetric flask which is a consumable, but in terms of a laboratory, it requires the same level of technical management that your $300,000 asset would require. And most systems fall short then of providing the same functionality on both items, and that is a major advantage of our asset management module as well. I just want to double check. Can everybody still hear me clearly?
Yes. Yes, we do.
Yeah,
Sure,
very
thank
clear.
you. Okay, some key application features and benefits. We sort of subdivide them into just the different themes. The themes of technology, user contribution, centralization, and then organization and cost. In terms of technology, application is web-based, and it is also built on a platform that allows for rapid application development. I won't go into too much detail, but at the end of the day, you're comparing rapid application development techniques to that of traditional techniques. And in the sense of time and costs, rapid application development, it's a newer technology, a newer way of doing things, and it allows us to develop applications a lot faster. It makes the applications a lot more flexible, and obviously because it's a lot easier and takes a lot less time, it is a lot more scalable and cost effective as well. It also enables us to provide customizable modules and reports. No two organizations are the same, even though the objectives are the same. So within the application, it is quite easy for us to customize the modules and the reports. Even though it's still the same application, it can have a look and feel to the customer's requirements. In terms of other technological features, it has built-in artificial intelligence, geolocation, and OCR, short for optical character recognition as well, which could be employed for many different things, depending on the customer's needs. In terms of user contribution, and I think it's a poorly understood or heavily understated component as well. It's, user contribution is such a key element in this day and age to really have a system work for the organization. If your users can't contribute actively, especially to quality management systems, it just becomes a record system, and people, organizations just have the system because they need something to, to record information on. However, if you can adopt a system or application that allows for users to actively contribute, that is widely accessible and easily accessible, that's sort of fundamental to really implementing a system and benefiting from it to the highest possible level. So how do we achieve that? It's obviously because it's web-based, it's accessible via desktop, tablet, and mobile phone. It has robust modules for notifications via SMS or emails, and then to make it easy on the user, it has interactive dashboards and calendars as well. In terms of centralization, so although we have these separate modules, it's still all one application, so they are integrated. Segregated systems is again one of the larger contributing factors to organizations not benefiting from the systems that they have. It's because they have different systems to achieve in which they, for instance, manage quality as opposed to their assets, and then in the case of laboratories, that they use to manage the laboratory. So by integrating all of that into one system, we cancel out that that risk of ending up with segregated or let's say segregation and inefficiencies as well. So yes, as I mentioned, the modules that are included or integrated would be the LIMS module, assets module, and then we have the quality management as well. And then as part of that, we also integrate two financial systems to really allow for an automated process from start to finish. And in terms of organization and cost, like I've already explained, the system is very flexible because of the technology that it's built on. That's then very scalable as well because it doesn't require any local infrastructure other than internet connectivity, and it's extremely cost effective compared to any other systems or competing systems out there. It also encourages paperless environments. There's an underlying theme, and that'll become evident as we run through the application, an underlying theme of constantly allowing the user or the organization to still upload hard copy documents, capture images, link them to the appropriate records. No one is saying that paperless means no paper. I think the world is still quite a few years away from that, but it does not mean that you can't digitize it. So the system provides input, electronic input as far as possible, plus then the added benefit of uploading hard copy documents, images, etc. And then lastly, and this is especially true to quality management systems as well. You know, companies and again, especially laboratories and manufacturing environments have rather stringent SOPs that dictate how things are to be done, and they are subject to accreditation organizations as well that audit them on those SOPs and policies and procedures and instructions. So to adopt a system that's going to require you to change your entire quality manual is a big deterrent, no matter how desperate the organization is for an electronic system or a new system. Having to change your quality manual significantly or your procedures is a big deterrent. Now, because our platform delivers a highly flexible, well, let's say it is highly flexible and configurable, it allows us to have a system that is more adapting to the customer's system as opposed to the customer having to adapt their quality procedures. So those are sort of the key application features and benefits and just the themes, and I suppose that adds to the value proposition of the solution as well. All right, so on to the first module, which is the LIMS or Laboratory Information Management module. The next slide. So what you see there is just some examples of the dashboard views, and we'll look at that just now. So we'll quickly, I think, just work through this workflow and the features that they entail, and then we'll jump over to the live app, I think, just for everybody to relate to that. Now, I understand that not everybody has had equal exposure or any exposure at all to, let's say, laboratories specifically. But I think you can take the approach or go with the understanding that ultimately whether it's a customer or a production plant sends or collects samples in batches, that are submitted to a laboratory. The laboratory would need to register, receive those samples, register them in their system, assign the necessary tests, and some of the samples may need to be tested to certain specifications in order to measure compliance at the end of the day. So that's sort of the receiving process, and then once that process has been concluded, then those samples are dispatched to the laboratory, during which you'll have a batch, could have one or more samples, and each sample could have one or more tests. So as the samples are dispatched to laboratories and different samples are tested in different departments and by different people, etc., workflow management becomes quite important, so that you can keep, yes, it's one batch of samples that was received to the laboratory, but once it's dispatched into the laboratory, you could have a sequence of 1,000 different tests on 50 different samples. So at that stage, the laboratory and the analysts and the instruments would be performing tests in staggered approaches. Some tests may run concurrently, others may have to run one after the other. It just depends on the nature of the test. So as the individual test parameters are generated, those results, the laboratory starts to capture those results. Results that are captured would have to be assessed and then either approved. They may have to be retested, maybe cancelled, or returned back to the lab for whatever reason as well. And then the laboratory may also need to issue some interim results. So you could have a portion of your results available, but not everything yet. But you may need to start reporting some of those results as well. So just want to make sure. I think someone wanted to ask something.
Yeah, it's me. Just a quick input. If you guys are not keeping along with him and you need to stop Vian and ask a question, please do so. And if you think that you can ask a question at the end, because the thing is, when he's going through this material, it will be much more effective for him to respond on that particular point at that time. So please feel free to interrupt him if you really need to get some clarification, because some of the, computer systems can be quite complex, and if you miss something crucial, you might not be able to follow later on as well. Sorry.
No, sure. Thanks.
Their guests have been waiting to join. If you could accept them.
I've been trying repeatedly, and there seems to be a problem with his connection.
Yeah, there is actually a problem with Alfred Magarausch's contact. Shadrach did join, there was no problem. But Alfred, unfortunately, there's a problem with this connection. I spoke to Patrick, who communicated, I hope, with him offline to say, listen, try again, or else if everything fails, we'll send him the presentation as we are recording it.
Yeah, I'm sure Evelyn must be together with Alfred. If Evelyn can confirm, I can see there is Evelyn there.
Yes, we're sharing a device at the moment with Alfred.
So I think we are sorted now. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. I appreciate it, sir. Thank you. We can proceed, Vian, but please do raise questions during Vian's presentation. We will stop and respond to that, because sometimes it's quite important that you understand fully what is happening. Sorry.
Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Lucy. Are there any questions to this point, or can we maybe finish the slide and then relate what we see on the screen now to the live application? Anybody, any questions? I'll take that as a no for now. But please do raise your hand if need be, or just voice the question. Okay, so we were just at the stage of, as tests are being completed in the laboratory and captured in different methods, they are also assessed and approved at that stage, and some results may need to be reported already before the entire batch is complete and so forth. Once the last test on a batch has been completed, it's time for the laboratory to generate the final test report. We allow for multiple formats, and it really just depends on the nature of the laboratory and their report layout. So that is something that's assessed for each and every lead. But yes, you have the generating of the final report, and then it has to be signed and issued to the customer. Or a different department in the organization. It can be signed either manually, scanned and emailed, or via a digital signature platform, for which we provide a solution as well. Once the report has been issued, there's just the last step of finalizing that job or the batch, and the laboratory may need to finalize the invoicing. If there's financial system integration, they would export the invoice to the financial system, and they would upload the final test report back into the application, that the application can recognize that batch as being completed, and it moves it on to the next stage. So that's what we've gone through now and looked at. It's a high-level laboratory process. Some laboratories are much more complex, but they still go through more or less the same stages in terms of what we saw here. So I think before we cover the flows of the other modules, I'll quickly just jump to the live app so we can just relate this to that particular module in the app. Okay. Right. So so across the system, we have basic dashboard layouts, which can function as is or be customized to the customer's liking, and so forth. In terms of the laboratory module, the laboratory module has, and if we relate to the slide, it has the various stages of receiving at laboratory. There's the result approval stage, and then the job completion stage is exactly what we had just discussed. So I won't go into too much detail, but just for everybody to get a sense of how that would work. So firstly, I would add my batch, in which it's basic job registration. One can relate to many other industries as well. You have a customer, you have a job name or a project reference, all the basic details. You specify some due dates, and then these screens are customized to the customer's current layouts, because different customers may need to record different kinds of information. So on the platform, it's very easy to adapt these screens. There are obviously certain fields that relate to the core logic of the system, such as system numbering fields that we don't touch, but anything else is just common information, and that's quite easy for us to configure to the customer's requirements. So what we see here is an example of a medical laboratory, where they have patient and trial details, etc., and so forth. Once I have captured the batch information, I can then add and assign samples to that particular batch. And like I said, a batch can have one or multiple samples. And again, each sample has its own unique information. That's quite key to laboratories. So again, you can add, capture all the relevant sample information. Again, the screens are already adapted and generic and suitable to most laboratories. It's just where we need to make some adjustments, where that can be done quite easily, and so forth. And yes, so aside from general sample information, I can then also then add the specific tests to the individual sample, or I can select bundles of tests. If I have for repetitive work, if I have a certain bundle of tests that I always perform for a certain customer or for a specific sample, instead of having to link those tests to each sample individually, I can set up bundles or specifications, and then just select the bundle that I need to apply to the sample, and the system automatically links and registers all those tests for that particular sample. Further to this, I can also, on receiving, capture photos of the samples as they came in to laboratory. So it's a good example of and this is literally a process of it's not taking the picture with when we say capture images on the system, we don't mean capture them on a camera, upload them to a computer, name the file or save the file somewhere and then upload them into the system. It's a direct function whereby you would, whether it's on a desktop with a webcam or a mobile device with a camera, you take that picture on the camera as you see it. In this case, it's not the best looking of samples, but you can see that how the functionality would work. So I've taken the sample. If I save it, that image or the document is saved with this exact record, accessible at a later stage at any point in time. I didn't have to save it elsewhere and import it into the system at a later stage. It's 2 clicks and it's done. And that's how it works for at any point in stage where we say upload images and documents into the system. That is how efficient that works. Okay, so we've added batch information, we've added samples, we've added tests to our batch or all the samples. This is the receiving stage, so it's things are being finalized and confirmed and so forth. And all that's left for the laboratory to do is then to acknowledge that it's been finalized. It can then dispatch that particular job, and what that does is that sends the entire work instruction. It removes it from the receiving department's dashboard, what we're looking at now, and that moves on to the next stage, which is then into the laboratory. Okay. Under laboratory, the laboratory analysts can then, again, from their computers or screens, monitors against the wall or mobile devices, see exactly what work has been submitted to the laboratory and ready for testing. And this serves as the work instruction as well as the input sheet. So any of that analyst can at any point in time search or sort any of these according to the tests that are assigned to them, and they can easily see the outstanding workflow. The system also manages the test at an individual level based on their due date. So part of the system setup is that you get to define your estimated turnaround time for that test. So at the receiving stage, the system already pre-calculates the due date for each individual test, and they may differ from one test to the other, even if it's on the same batch, and the system manages that because it allows for turnaround times to be included as part of the, it's at the setup stage, and so forth. So yes, so it serves as the work instruction either electronically or the user can still print these as manual, hard copy work instructions as well. So again, we provide for, or as much as we want to promote paperless environments, it still allows them to do printouts anywhere and everywhere across the system. As the tests are completed, the analysts can then access them to capture the results. So these are all just technical test information, etc. All we really need to be concerned with now is the fact that they can capture their results, for instance, specify units of measure, although that's already part of the setup information, and then save that. Once saved, they would confirm the test as being captured, and that removes the test from their dashboard. Because the test is done, if it's not on their screen, it's not their problem. That test now moves onto the result approval phase, and that's typically what's called a technical signatory, or generally the laboratory manager, onto their dashboard, and so forth. So in terms of test and result management, that's how the system facilitates that. There's also the added feature of sample tracking. I'm not going to show you how it works, but essentially it enables the laboratory analyst to, as they receive their samples, there's an easy way to update the location of the samples. So at any point in time, anybody can see that. So if I have those samples in my possession, I can update the sample location, and the next person can then see what the current location of that sample is. Like I mentioned, some samples may need to move from one department to the other, so it's quite important to be able to track the location of samples. I showed you up top one way of capturing results on the system, where you go into each of the tests individually to capture the result. We also have a spreadsheet view in which I can easily update multiple test results all at once, and select the units of measures. And then I can update them as well. And it's an alternative way of capturing the results like we did up top. So we have different methods, and different tests are better suited to each of those methods. So we provide those options to the customer. Okay, so that's in this stage. Yes, analysts are informed of the test to do. They can do their printouts or work on electronic dashboards, perform the test, capture the results. There's also a feature to import, to do bulk imports of results as well. But essentially all tests are then captured and acknowledged as captured, and that moves the individual tests onto the next stage, which is result approval. So I'll go there. So under result approval, so this is generally a dashboard of what's called a technical signatory or a manager. So I can up above see what is still in the lab due to be completed, but I can now also see what has already been completed and ready for me to assess. So I can see broken down into the batch numbers, sample numbers, etc. Per sample, I can see what, and per test, what the results are. If there were limits applicable, does it fall within the limits or not? Based on that, make my decision to either approve the result, to retest it, to cancel it, or to reopen it. And reopening it would just open that back up and send it back to the laboratory analyst's dashboard. If I click on a retest, it stores the original result and it creates a new test that also then appears on the analyst's dashboard. And there could be different reasonings to why a test would have to be retested and so forth. But predominantly they are approved. So again, as results are approved by the signatory, they again move out of this particular dashboard. It should become clear that the system not only displays these dashboards, but the theme is that during each of the stages, the receiving stage, where it's incoming work, it should record, or let's say it should be in and out. So for a batch of samples I receive, I register it, I add my samples, I add my test, and then I dispatch it and it disappears from my dashboard. So it's no longer my problem. It moves on to the laboratory phase, where tests are then completed individually. As they are captured, they are removed from my dashboard. So again, that dashboard should be as empty as possible. It moves on to the result approval phase. Again, it's a dashboard with the intention to keep it clear. So as the results come in, they can already be assessed and approved. As they are approved, again, they are removed from the dashboard. So that enables the system to automatically monitor and manage the workflow as well. Sorry, I think someone may want to ask something.
Yeah, excuse me, Björn. Yeah, I think just to highlight the point about the different phases or different phases of the process. These different dashboards, which Björn is talking about, can represent teams in large laboratories. So in other words, if a team is in a process where they capture the test results, that particular job will not appear in the team which requires approval. So basically, in terms of the team that does the approval or the individual that does the approval, the only job which will come into his dashboard will be the job that requires approval. So you won't see what is on the other phases, whether it's something which has just come into the laboratory or something that requires a certain action somewhere else. So whoever is responsible for an activity, this process can be customized in a manner that allows for a specific team to see what they are supposed to do. It facilitates a flow of the activities within a laboratory environment. Sorry.
Correct.
Sorry, hi.
Yeah.
Just a
sorry,
quick question.
Okay.
So it's Srini Nadia. So you said that each team will be able to see what information is pertinent to them and what they need to do. But I'm assuming that there will be a view that is overall to capture everything that's in the system.
Yes. So obviously to the individuals that you would like to give those access permissions to, like you would see on screen now. So I have a view of every single batch that was ever registered into the system. I can see the relevant stages. If I'm rather looking for specific samples, I can see every single sample that's in the laboratory, irrespective of the stage, and then so too for any of the tests in the laboratory as well. So this is sort of that holistic view. Let's say you're looking for something, you're not sure in what stage it is, this is the place to find it. But it's generally you want to limit that access, obviously, to only relevant individuals. But I hope that answers the question.
Yeah. Just to emphasize the point, Jan. Yeah, basically, if you are let's say you are the lab manager. As a lab manager, you want to have a dashboard that shows you all the different teams and their work, because you are overall managing it. And so depending on the access or the level of authority you have within the organization, you will see what is relevant to you. Now, if you're a manager, you obviously, or if you're a company manager who runs this particular laboratory, you want to see maybe the summary, the dashboard of where things are. That's where this color coding comes in. So you can see that, oh yeah, this thing is at a laboratory, it's now overdue. How come this particular test is overdue? You can have a look at it, go directly to it and see what the status of that particular job is. And then you can contact the individuals involved and say, well, this job has been overdue for so long, what's happening? So immediately you can see what is happening within the overall laboratory.
Yeah,
Does that,
I think my question has been answered by Vusi, because I was just looking from a point of that is from the lab manager's point of view in terms of what can go wrong, because it's a smart system, but you need to know what's happening, like with all the other teams, like what you just explained. But just another question there is, what are the critical points of this system so that they are effective in a lab?
So, sorry, what are the critical points?
What are critical points? Is it the receiving? Well, yeah, I'm just looking at the workflow to say, okay, or is everything critical, or how do we sort of look at sort of the whole workflow?
So I think the best way to answer that would be to understand that a laboratory is, you can have a batch of 1,000 tests with a certain deadline. If you miss the deadline with one result, that is what you are remembered for, because in a lot of cases, until the final report is issued, it's not final, unfortunately, in the case of laboratories. So the critical point is to ensure that the progress and the status of each test individually is managed in an automated manner as far as possible, so that nothing can't be missed, or to reduce the probability that something can be missed. So the system the functions within the system forces that onto the lab. So for instance, yes, everything is critical, but if everybody sticks to their dashboard and understands what functions they need to perform to keep their dashboard clear, then those exact or individual tests are being managed and are being moved along. Because if it's not moved along, it means that it's stuck on someone's dashboard somewhere. If that answers the question.
Yeah, Vian, can I just add something? When you say something, so, yeah, when you say you're talking about a critical point, you see, for a lab environment, I was just thinking about a situation which we have in South Africa. We are really suffering from this COVID thing, right? Now, I am a client of this laboratory. I go to this camp or wherever we go to and take a test for COVID. What is the critical point for me? The critical point for me as the end user is when they take the blood from me and the result. So whatever happens in between is neither here nor there. But as a lab manager, especially during a pandemic such as this, the critical situation is the throughput of how many tests you are able to put through the system as quickly as possible. So you might have a way of saying, well, for me, the way the whole thing works more effectively is I've cut down the process of processing a sample from receival of a sample, going through, checking, put whatever liquid or whatever chemical you put into that particular sample, produce the results, and then be able to communicate the results. So as a lab manager, you want to see the entire process in various stages and see where the bottleneck is. You might find that the bottleneck is actually at a stage where you're actually conducting the test. And then you can preemptively go and attend to that. So to see the whole flow, and you can have some statistics which says this kind of tests take so many hours to process. Maybe you create a graph which shows you that is this particular process getting better or getting worse. Now this system enables you to track something like that statistically, basically. So a critical point, depending on who is the end user of that particular process. If you are the lab manager, each and every stage is quite critical because it affects the overall throughput, if I might put it that way.
Yes, and I think perhaps just to add to that, Vusi, so the system constantly keeps track of every time a test is completed. It monitors how long it took the laboratory to complete that. So if there's whether it's a healthy or unhealthy trend coming to the fore, again, that can be easily picked up on the dashboards because it constantly monitors what is the average turnaround time, not just on a particular on jobs, but also even on specific tests. So that it's more about avoiding bottlenecks than what it is seeing where they are. If a system functions well, you shouldn't have bottlenecks. The only reason for a bottleneck should be a lack of resources. That should be, yes, in a perfect world, but that is that should be one's approach. And the reason, or the way in which the system achieves that is to automate and enforce the workflow and all the functions that each user has to perform to maintain that flow. And if they don't, then that's where their dashboard starts filling up. So if there are such bottlenecks, they can immediately be traced. Does that somewhat answer your question? I'll take that as a. Can I take that as a yes? Sorry, I didn't see who asked that question. Okay.
Yeah, I think we can carry on. Right. I think it was Azvinia, but I think unless he has an issue with his connection. Thanks.
Okay. So just back to where we were under the result approval phase, and having the trust that the minute that the last test on a batch has been approved, the system automatically picks up on that, and it moves the entire batch. It flags the managers of all the completed jobs. So again, I have a dashboard that tells me, yes, exactly all the batches that have been completed, but they're not yet finalized. And what does it require to be finalized? It's two things. It's to generate a costing. Now that is something we can switch on and off depending on the customer. So for instance, take a manufacturing environment. So let's say the laboratory, it's not a commercial testing entity. It's just it's an in-house department, and they just do quality control on their own products. So on the laboratories books. It's an expense department. It doesn't generate revenue, so they also have no interest in. They have no one to invoice, and they're certainly not going to invoice themselves. So they may not need the pro forma function. So we would disable that. But that is the one criteria, and then the other is to upload a final report. Once I've uploaded a final report, now keep in mind that there are different methods to generate final reports depending on the nature of the laboratory. Some laboratories could even still prefer to do the manual reports, so they capture all of their results in the system, but let's say they have reports, and for whatever reason they just prefer to do it, in Microsoft Word in a certain format, and so forth. It doesn't matter whether you use the system's built-in reports, an Excel export, and a report built with pivot tables, or even a report that was generated from outside the system. You are able to upload those reports onto the batch, specify some key information when it was submitted, the type of report. This is quite key because the system will demand at least a final report. You can send any number of interim reports. The system will keep the job as not, or see the job as not finalized. It will remain on the dashboard until it has an indication that a final report has been submitted. And again, it can be submitted in various ways. So the system does not limit the user to say, oh, it can only be sent via automated email. In some cases, so let's say some of our customers, they test feed products and seed products. They have to issue a certified hard copy of the results, whether by courier or post to the container ship before it can leave the harbor. So different laboratories will use different methods of submitting their results, and that's why we don't limit that in the system, and we allow the user to upload any kind of report into the system and acknowledge how it was delivered, to whom, any particular comments, and then you can also then upload the actual attachments there as well, whether it's uploading from a local, if it's a computer file saved as an attachment, or even taking a picture again with a mobile device, or so forth. And only then will the if I have a final report attached to my job, will the system complete that job and remove the job from the dashboard, and again ensure that flow. So again, a dashboard, if I know what's required for items to be removed from this, and I stick to those, the system will take care of the rest. From here, it goes into archiving, and that brings us back to the dashboard we were looking at earlier, where I can access any and every job. Okay. Just want to make sure I haven't missed anything. So that just brings us back. I think we've essentially covered the majority, the main items that we have in the LIMS module. So yes, I think before we move on to the next module, they require a bit less time, so we don't mind spending a bit more time on the LIMS module. That is the more complicated one. Any other questions from anybody on the LIMS module? What I can perhaps also maybe just elaborate on that more and more laboratories are starting to look into in terms of equipment integration. Different equipment operate on different protocols. So we can integrate equipment or automate the data flow. I think is the larger objective. To many different instruments, a lot of laboratories use scales or balances. For that, we have a middleman interface, for instance, that can that transmits the measurement directly from the instrument, to the system without any data files in between. Some of your more expensive machinery, such as analyzers, etc., they have their own software program with their own interface that you can't interface with, other than using the export files that they produce and then importing them into the system. So different instruments, different protocols, different approaches, but also something that we provide for. That is in terms of equipment integration and barcode labeling and scanning and printing is generally something we prefer for a phase 2, because different customers require automation in a different way, and they don't quite. It's hard for them to know what they'll require in terms of automation until they've learned the system. So once the customer learns the system, they will realize that it already automates a lot of what was previously manual processes, and they'll have a better understanding of what they would like to automate further. And we prefer to then, as in a phase 2, start engaging on automation initiatives and so forth. It's extremely difficult to do a full-blown implementation all at once if most laboratory customers move from manual systems to electronic systems. And so because of that, have little insight or understanding of the value add of an electronic system as is. So it's just better to take a staggered approach such as that, unless the customer insists that he wants to do everything, obviously in one go. But we prefer to advise against that. Okay, so I plan on moving on to the next module. Or maybe just I'll ask one last time. Any questions on the LIMS module? Doesn't sound like it. If you do think of something, feel free to. Oh, I think we have someone.
So far, so good. Yeah.
Okay, sure. Okay, on to quality management. So, and this is something that applies to most organizations. Whether it's a laboratory, a construction company. I mean, the list goes on. So our quality management module has been built to ISO standards, not to particular industries, because those various industries merely align with the ISO standards in terms of quality management. So I've mentioned the different standards that we incorporated into the design of the module. And this is the basic quality management workflow that the customer would achieve. Or not to achieve, the customer already has to follow this. However, doing that effectively, especially with manual systems, is difficult. And doing that with a system that's not flexible is near impossible. Why do I say that? If you have a system developed in a traditional on a traditional platform, traditional methods. So we talk about Microsoft, C# and SQL databases, the traditional software applications on server solutions. You can't easily customize your input parameters or the screens or the forms. And even if you can do it easily, it takes a long time, and it's a lot more costly. So in terms of quality management, the challenge that an organization is faced with is if I have a non-conformance or an incident, I need to investigate it, and I'll need to determine the root causes, implement some corrective actions. I'm just going to activate my laser pointer. So I mean, quality management revolves a lot around non-conformances and incidents. Ultimately, you want to reduce those, and where they come up, and they always will, to manage them in a way that prevents the likelihood of them recurring in the future or in other departments. Okay, so if it's identified, you would have to do proper root cause analysis. Based on your root cause analysis, you would have to apply corrective action to rectify the matter at hand. For those corrective actions, you also need to identify actions for improvement or to prevent reoccurrence, and potentially also, and especially in the case of laboratories are forced to also, from corrective actions, identify risks and opportunities. From both actions of improvement and risks and opportunities, you'll implement actions or identify and implement actions, and in some time from having implemented those actions, you need to go and monitor the effectiveness of those actions. And yes, they could be effective, which is ideal for the laboratory, or someone may find, and this could be 6 or 12 or 18 months down the line, and someone could see, oh, well, this actually happened again. So obviously what was implemented was not effective. So it wasn't effective. That all filters back into a new non-conformance or incident report, and it has to do the same cycle or follow the same cycle from there. So getting back to my first point, why is this so difficult with a software system if it's not flexible? It's because at any point in time from your root cause analysis may have determined that a worksheet, an operator did not record an oven temperature on the worksheet, but it's because the worksheet did not provide a block for the temperature to be recorded, and ultimately something overheated and exploded. Simple example. So I want to go paperless, but I need worksheets. So I'm constantly going to have instances where I previously would have had to update worksheets, add new fields or blocks, etc. if I want to go paperless and use a software system for that, I need that same kind of flexibility. If I'm able to add new fields and blocks on my current manual system in an Excel or Word document, I need a software system that provides me with that same level of flexibility. Now, it's not that it can't be done on solutions that are built on traditional platforms. It takes too long and it's far too expensive. And that's one of the main reasons why our quality management module fills, we feel, a much needed gap. And it's probably why there are so few quality management systems out there that can deliver the same. That ability to continuously grow with the organization's quality manual and procedures. Because of simple updates, even just that may be required on worksheets. So yes, I think just getting back to that. So in terms of non-conformances and incident reports, the flow is such that root cause analysis is performed. Now, for each of these modules, I just want to add, you obviously have all the necessary input forms that can be further configured as well. So for an incident or non-conformance, in conducting root cause analysis, we can configure the system to cater for different methods. Different organizations use different methods to determine root cause analysis. But the action for that can be assigned, and that person receives a notification with all the incident or non-conformance details. Once the investigation is concluded, you would select from his root cause categories what were the primary and secondary root causes. Through the use of the built-in artificial intelligence, the system actually predicts its own root cause analysis as well, which the user can compare to his findings, and then that obviously feeds into trend analysis as well. I think someone may wanted to say or ask something. Maybe not. Okay. Following root cause analysis would be corrective actions. Again, different actions assigned to different people. Comes with, again, the same kind of dashboards that we were looking at in the LIMS module. We'll look at the quality management module in just a second. And again, across the board, the user can again upload documents and images as well. The documents and images team is probably even more useful in the quality management module than in the LIMS module, because quality management is all about, it's about saying what you do and doing what you say and providing the necessary evidence for that. So in the majority of quality systems, I would write down what my corrective actions were, and I would sign that it's been implemented. I can still do that, but now because I can easily upload documents and images, I can take a photo of what has been implemented. If it's something that had to be repaired or put in place, there's no real limit. It's supporting evidence, and it's just a much easier way of doing things. Following the corrective actions, or in concluding corrective action, you then also need to record actions for improvement and preventive action. So again, it has its own register. You can assign necessary persons and they are notified. And through all of this, target dates are set and tracked as well. You would acknowledge the implementation of those actions and then schedule the effectiveness to be monitored. And this will differ per action, per company, but I would be able to say, okay, for this action that I've implemented, the effectiveness needs to be monitored in 6 months or 18 months from now. and that automatically feeds into the effectiveness submodule or feature, where all of the actions that are taken are scheduled for monitoring effectiveness, and that builds up this essentially calendar that I can just follow to see what needs to be monitored when, and then acknowledge, was it effective, was it not effective? If it was, that's great. If it wasn't, then that would go back and trigger a new non-conformance because of actions that were not effective, and then the process would start from all over again. And then if we look towards the left of the screen, in terms of quality management, we also have personnel, as they contribute greatly to quality management. So in the personnel submodule, you would be able to have your personnel profiles. There's automated training and competency management. So for each personnel member, I would have competency templates or elements in my organization that I would set up. So if I add someone new, I would say these are the elements in which that person needs to be competent. I would link those to that person at registration, and then the system will automatically start scheduling that person to be trained and evaluated. And if I had said that the person needs to be evaluated every 12 months on this element, the system schedules that each time the previous item is completed or the current item is completed, the system already schedules the next event for that element, for that person. So it manages training to the highest level for the organization. And then again, uploading of documents. I think I've said enough about.
Sorry, quick question.
Documents. Sure.
Under personnel, does that include, like, if a company has a requirement to do medical testing, for their personnel on a regular basis? Does that module cater for that?
Yes, so it's fairly robust in terms of the templates that you can set up, because they aren't just competencies. It's let's say compliance. So compliance may mean competency in an SOP, or compliance may mean that personnel need to go for evaluations, whether that's a medical check or so forth, is irrelevant. So I'll make sure to just demonstrate that just now as well. So it's essentially anything that's reoccurring that people constantly need to be monitored on, and that has to be managed at the end of the day. In terms of the assets, equipment, and inventory, that's obviously the next module that we'll look at, but that obviously feeds into quality as well, and especially non-conformances and incident reports. If something, if equipment is manhandled or not, producing errors, and then that affects quality, and then the quality management process has to occur. But we'll look at the details of this module just now. And then lastly, in terms of document control, so again, there's a document control module. What does it do? It's obviously a full-scale document and version register. So I'm able to register any kind of document, whether it's internal or external, or even website links in the system. I can again upload the hard copy for each version, so it's readily accessible to any system user, and I can also schedule reviews for the relevant documents. So it's less applicable in other organizations, more so in laboratories as well. But laboratories, for instance, have to define how often certain documents have policies and procedures are reviewed. So I can, for each of those, indicate this needs to be reviewed every 18 months. And then so the system would schedule that review. If the review is concluded, it automatically schedules the new review. And then, yes, as I mentioned, that you can upload each of the hard copies of the version as well. So I think just important to get across in terms of document control. It is not an electronic document system. It's document management system, and that ties into what I was saying earlier about not an organization does not have to and should not have to change the quality manual or transform their quality manual in order to be able to use the system. It should only require minor refinements. So they would essentially just take the quality manual as it is and import it, all the different versions into the system, and the system helps them to manage all of their documents. But they will maintain, edit their documents still in, for instance, if I'm editing version 2 of a certain document, I download it from the system, I edit it, and I upload it as version 3, and the system retains both copies. Okay. So I think then in terms of the quality management module, I will then just quickly run through that. It shouldn't take nearly as long as with LIMS. Okay. So it's a couple of different sub-modules. Obviously, as we said, I'll start with personnel, for instance. So again, most of these sub-modules would have their own dashboards. So under personnel, I can already see what items are planned for training on a calendar. Just trying to see there. All right, so there we can see some data. So system is already telling me what training is scheduled or evaluation is scheduled for that day. It's not only, it's an interactive calendar, so I can actually access those records right from within this calendar. So this already then serves as my both the instruction, and this all feeds off of those compliance elements that I was referring to. So you set that up in advance and link that to the individual, and that's how the system is able to sort of automate that. So yeah, a whole range of different dashboard views, and the user can even change these views to their liking. So I can easily change this from a register view, and what I'm showing now is a standard function across the system, even in the LIMS module. Everywhere where I have these dashboard views, I can change them as well to reflect differently. So just trying to look for a good example. Just maybe less of a good example, but I can see, let's say, organize these per person into a Kanban view, or perhaps even a or even per the element. So this would say all my outstanding medical checks, and you would immediately see, persons that need to go for that, all the persons that need training on test method 20, and it would sort them in that manner. So that function you have available in any of the dashboard, or let me say most of the dashboards. Obviously, some have some built-in logic that make it less possible on some, or even I can instead of a calendar view, convert that into a timeline view, for instance. So I'm just quickly jumping through them. So, okay. I think our data is just so there I can start seeing my timeline view or even a list view. So it's all the same data, and we're just viewing them in different formats. Function is obviously more useful in some areas than in other. So I just want to show you in terms of personnel. So like I said, you have your personnel register. If I go into any one of these, so basic information that you can record, or even a screen that can be further customized. But then this is what I was referring to in terms of compliance elements. So the end user gets to set up all these different elements, and it can relate to SOPs, it can relate to medical checkups. It doesn't really matter. Let me go into the setup portion for that. So what I have selectable here is what I have set up over here. So I can add a new element, and I could say what it would want, and so I can describe what kind of a checkup or what needs to happen on that element. Evaluation criteria, to say the person needs to pass this test or obtain a certain score. Again, no limit. It's purposely built to be as robust as possible, or to adapt to any kind of scenario or element that needs to be monitored. And then this is where I would say that needs to happen, let's say, while we're in the era. So every 12 months, and I would say submit. So that's my template, my compliance template, and that is then available is our annual medical checkup. You'll see it draws through all the information from that, plus the frequency. And if I, on saving this, the system now schedules the first one, and then that's where it starts feeding into the sorry, not that one. So this is essentially the list view of the calendar we were previously looking at, and the system starts to manage that going forward. Once I've done the first one, system takes over from there, and it schedules the recurring events. So I think in terms of personnel, I think it covers the basics, but then I think maybe to mention lastly is, so all of the personnel that you have set up are then serve as lookup values everywhere else. You know, if I have a non-conformance and I need to say who the responsible person is or who was involved with the incident and so forth, I have these lookup lists, and that'll display all of the people in my organization, and this is where that draws that from. So it's not just a personnel module to manage training and so forth. It also feeds into the LIMS modules, the ASIC module, etc. Okay. All right, moving on from personnel, I think I'll just keeping notes of the time as well. Personnel, we'll look at assets and equipment just now. So I think very briefly in terms of non-conformances, or sort of heart of quality management. So our default form is quite big, so I'm not going to cover it in all too much detail, but essentially it's an electronic method of capturing the entire incident, all relevant information. There we'll see I'm selecting from my personnel module who were all the witnesses involved, the severity, etc. At what branch did it occur? So also worth mentioning is this is a multi-branch, multi-department platform where you can have multiple branches working on one platform and share in a quality management system. One key benefit of that is you no longer need a dedicated quality manager, for each branch. That can all be centralized. But the second benefit of if a non-conformance occurs in one location, it's very difficult with the manual system to really apply effective quality management across your other branches. However, here you can identify it in one branch. However, when we get to the root cause analysis section and the investigator finds that this is actually applicable not just to the branch where it occurred, but actually to other branches as well, then that enables them to schedule corrective action not just for the branch where it was identified, but each of the branches where the investigator found that to be applicable. So, and this initiates, even though it's a non-conformance that originated in one branch, this initiates the quality management process across the entire organization, wherever the investigator felt that was applicable. So basic non-conformance details at the top. There's some risk assessment sections as well. Suspension of work is relevant in some cases. You'll see that the system is able to record signatures as well. It's not critical because there's a full system audit trail in the background as well. So the system knows exactly who the user was, which values were updated when, and so forth. But it's just an added feature. There's root cause analysis, obviously, as well. I get to define my primary root cause as well as secondary root cause. All these lookups are for the user sets up his own lookup items. It's not what we define for them. So it has a very robust setup module as well. So yes, the user or the organization defines their own root causes. The system has then a smart root cause function as well. So through artificial intelligence, the more data is fed into the system, the more accurate the AI bot can then, based off of those data, make its own prediction as well in terms of the root cause category. So it would look at who was involved, what SOPs were involved. Is there a trend for this particular person with this particular SOP, and so forth. In conclusion of all of that, the investigator, the assigned investigator, can obviously make available his findings, make his recommended actions, and then assign those actions to the relevant persons, assign them to different branches, even if need be, indicate what actions are required, who's responsible for those actions, bearing in mind, and this is the reason we separate them, that different people could be responsible for different actions, set target dates, and so forth. And as he now updates this record, these persons are immediately notified via email with all the necessary non-conformance information that this has been assigned to them for their implementation. And they can obviously access the system on their own as well, and they'll see it assigned to them on the dashboard. So, and again, just to upload any kind of attachments, images. So especially in terms of incident reports or non-conforming work, now documents and images of what had happened and what has been done becomes critical. So you could see non-conformance, we have direct access into our corrective actions register. Keep in mind that corrective actions don't only just originate from non-conformances, they can originate from management review meetings, observations, audits. This is just so there's a separate corrective actions register. This is just a direct link or view into that register. We don't have to navigate there, but in updating that, it automatically schedules them in the corrective actions register. I then have the same so under my corrective actions that have now been scheduled, let's say via the non-conformance, all of the information would be pre-filled from the non-conformance already. I would see what non-conformance this is related to already. Acknowledge that it's been closed out, and then just to get back to the process we were discussing here in terms of then identifying actions for improvement and then risks and opportunities. You can now, in closing out this corrective action and have an understanding of what that would entail, I can now schedule actions for improvements if need be, or just acknowledge that there aren't any relevant. The same for risks and opportunities. And those would now in turn feed into my improvement and preventive actions registers, as well as the risks and opportunity register. And again, they can also be updated from within other sections. So let's say I had a action for improvement or preventive action. It's not originating from a non-conformance or a corrective action, but it's just something that came up in an audit or an observation. I can still access that register, so I can see which actions originated from non-conformances, for instance, but I can still add a normal action as well, and that would just and assign that to a person, and that would just further update the register, and so forth. The same goes for risks and opportunities, where they may or may not be linked to a corrective action. I can again capture them and perform my risk and opportunity evaluation as well. They would feed into the register, be assigned to a certain person with target dates, and so forth as well. And then all of that, you'll see, if I take improvement as an example, it's an action that I have taken, and I can now schedule the effectiveness for this action with a planned verification date. So I have this function in this submodule, I have it under corrective actions, I have it under risks and opportunities, and all of that feeds into my effectiveness schedule, which essentially tells me, there we can see in the month of April, all of the actions that are due to be verified. Again, not only can I see this action, I can just access it as is. I can see what were the actions implemented, and then make a judgment of whether it was effective or not. I would obviously go and look into whether that has perhaps reoccurred or so forth. Has that instrument did break again in the same way? Did the operator make the same mistake? Yes or no? If it's been effective, then fine, and then that's closed out. And again, I can attach supporting evidence of that. Again, whether it's from an evaluation document, a certificate, an image of something that was implemented or found to be effective, and then save it. And that would close out and conclude that cycle. If it was found not to be effective, then that would create a new non-conformance, and the cycle restarts. But it retains all of the original information. Okay, I think lastly on the quality management module side would be document control. So as I said, it's not an electronic document system. It is an electronic document management system. So I would list all the different kinds of documents that I would need to number them. I can define my document types that I use in my organization, titles, whether there are applicable standards, the branches that this document applies to, or that it needs to be circulated to, so I have record of that, and so forth. And then, like I mentioned as well, the frequency of review. So this is the overall document, and now I can start to add my version numbers. Let's say what was sorry, one amendment record. I can say what was changed on that document, the basic information such as who was compiled by, who it was approved by, and so forth, whether it's a controlled document or not, the status of that document, and obviously then its effective dates, and so forth as well. And then how often it needs to be reviewed, and that will once it's saved, the system will calculate the next review date, or after the first review, it will automatically schedule the next review. And then I can attach this particular version in the system as well, which is then obviously downloadable from the system, or viewable by any user. I think that covers the document control section on a high level. Yes, I think just looking at time as well. So I think that covers the basics of the quality management module. I'll quickly open up the floor to any questions before we just quickly look at the asset management module.
Yeah, Björn, I'm also curious in terms of I know there is okay, you've got your LIMS and then you've got the quality management systems. I know some of the guys have been working in environments where, especially when you talk about mining or I don't know, manufacturing, I don't know how much manufacturing countries are represented here. How important are quality management systems in those markets?
Oh, it's crucial, Vusi. I mean, I come from an engineering environment as well that had a lot to do with mining customers as well. Been working for laboratories as well, managed quality myself. So it's sadly, quality management systems at this stage for 90% of organizations is still the quality manual is a set of files in the quality manager's cupboard. Because because there are so few electronic systems out there that really deliver what's required, people are forced to do it the manual way. But now, because they do it a manual way, it takes away that element of user contribution that I was talking about earlier. It's a cupboard in a file, and all of a sudden everybody sees it as that person's responsibility, because it's not easily accessible by someone on a workshop floor or someone out operating a plant and so forth. So it forces you to adopt this intense paper-based system, and quality management is then just becomes, a discipline of generating records and saving them in a file, as opposed to and people working for the system instead of the system actually working, for them. So that's a long answer to a short question, but it's critical. It's just that organizations aren't benefiting really from properly implemented quality management systems because of how manual, the majority of organizations' quality management systems or quality manuals still are. Even to the extent of organizations having dedicated quality managers, because it's not centralized, dedicated quality managers for each of their branches, because they have no choice. So just in adopting an electronic or centralized quality management system, you don't need 10 quality managers within your organization, or let's just put it this way: it's not that you don't need them, but they can just be of so much more use to the organization than having to manage a paper-based manual record system.
I mean, you mentioned that, but then when I was working with mines, I find that there's more obsession with things such as SHEG, the safety, health, and stuff, systems. Now I was just thinking, last night, how do those SHEG systems relate to quality management systems? I mean, when I was actually working with, your big mines in South Africa, Impala, your Anglos, and those kind of guys, I can't remember anybody raising the issue of quality management system. But SHEG, it was foremost. Now, I'm not sure how a quality management system will relate to that, because SHEG also has got an element of safety. It's got an element of, I don't know, maybe it's more like safety and environment and that kind of thing, but not, and a bit of quality there, I think. I don't know. I mean, how it relates, I'm not sure.
No, sure. I think it's a combination. So, I mean, if you take health and safety in the workplace, that's all about being preventive. You do not want problems relating to health and safety really to come up. And so, where quality management, it's acceptable to be reactive to an extent. With health and safety, you'd really want to be, proactive or preventative, or take that kind of an approach. So if you look at the origin of most incidents, personnel competency, training, evaluation, that's quality management. If you consider the use and operation of equipment, that's your asset management, but with the technical component, which we'll look at just now, that tells you the handling procedure for this equipment is this, and here it is. So it's making that information available. Firstly, making sure that your people are competent, so competency is managed efficiently and effectively, that where equipment's being used, that they are being used in the right manner. So in order to do that, people need to constantly be reminded what is the correct procedure. Where do I find the manual for this document? Where is the material safety data sheet for this batch of chemicals? That's what we provide for in the asset and the equipment and inventory management module, where, what I was referring to earlier with bringing in all those technical elements as well. So now it's not just a system that tells me I have this batch and it expires in a week from now. It tells me I have this batch of chemicals. It expires in a week from now. Here's the material safety data sheet. Here's the test method for the laboratory or the procedure to mix the chemicals. Information is power only if it's accessible. And so I think in terms of health and safety is a combination of things, that you achieve through quality management, proper equipment and asset management. I suppose the only thing that's really missing there is in terms of facilities management, but that can also be achieved through the asset management module as well. Because in the same way I can register a vehicle as an asset and schedule services, which is maintenance. I can register a building or a fume cabinet as well, and schedule weekly checks, to make sure vents are open and chemicals aren't expired and so forth. And that's the facility, the environment. So that's how we cover, even though we don't call it health and safety, you achieve health and safety through, effectively using all these modules with the appropriate understanding.
I think Vian, that is key, because SET by definition means the safety, health, environment, and quality management systems. And they emerge as a way of addressing corporate sustainability issues that affect especially industry, mining, etc., etc. So I think that, for example, one of the biggest things, or one of the main things which made everyone familiar with SHAG, I know when we were sort of like the consultants to the mines, you had to do your training. Okay, it took a week to do training, and then you have to do your health check, and you had to do all those things are basically training based. It's human, a person, and the training which they need to get, and then you get a certification or a issue with a certificate which says you are qualified or you are allowed now. You can be allowed to go into those environments. So somehow I think when we're marketing this system, we can be able to cover the requirements that are related to SHAG, which is a big thing in the mining environment, especially. Okay.
Oh, sure. I agree. I am just making sure, is everybody still okay for time? Before we, I can try and run through the equipment asset module in 10-15 minutes. But if anybody has to go and maybe has an urgent question, maybe now is the time to ask. Or can we quickly continue?
I think let's carry on if we can.
Okay.
I think if the team can allow us to just, I know we are possibly over time, just for maybe 10-15 more minutes. Thanks, Vian.
Okay, sure. Thanks.
Must also mention, guys, I thought you guys have beaten more than you can chew, because we're talking about 3 systems here in one, and I know that Vian has been quite comprehensive in it. Obviously, one of the things we should all be aware of is that we're going to save this in our YouTube channel, so you guys can go back and review the material. And also, we're going to provide all this training materials to you guys. You can interact with it. Vian, one of the things we need to consider as well is to give these guys some kind of a log-on credential so that they can play around with the system somehow. I don't know how we're going to set it up so that you guys become more familiar with it. But at the end of the day, though, when you identify a potential customer out there, we will be ready to help do the presentations and engage with the client. So you would never at any stage feel inadequate in terms of presenting our value offering to our potential clients. I can continue, I think, Vian. I think let's
Sure.
shorten us the last presentation if possible, because people have been around for 2 hours. That's quite a long presentation.
Yeah. Okay, so I think very briefly in terms of the assets, instruments and inventory module in terms of workflow and features. I think of importance to note, and I've mentioned this before, is in this one module, we allowed the user the ability to not only set up an asset that's deemed an asset, being above a certain financial currency value, but also equipment that aren't classified as assets and in inventory, all in one module. It's something that took a lot of design consideration because we realized that even enterprise ERP systems don't really allow for that at this stage. So a key system parameter, we feel. So in terms of setup, yes, you can set up asset, equipment, inventory. You can define your equipment types or item types, set up inventory categories, inspection schedules, maintenance templates, and also suppliers. Then I think perhaps the easiest way to explain this portion, and we'll go on to the app just now, is so that's what we have in terms of setup. And then once I have done some setup, I can then actually register all of my assets. So I think also just to note, a lot of existing organizations already have a lot of existing items. We can import, we do bulk imports into the system as well. But yes, you would record general information, again, upload images, capture purchase and warranty details. These are handling information and documentation that we were discussing just now. And then I'll get to inspection criteria and maintenance templates just now, but you can also assign your item to a specific location or branch or so forth. Now, in terms of inspections and maintenance, we divide that into two. So I can easily, let's say, take a piece of equipment that needs to be calibrated or serviced every 12 months. That's quite easy because I just work 12 months off of the last service. In the system, you can easily, again, like we had compliance elements for personnel, you can set up maintenance elements, maintenance templates that you can then link to the equipment, an annual service or a daily check, weekly verification or cleaning it. There's no limit. I'll demonstrate that just now. But then I also have items that may need to be serviced every 100 operating hours. But I don't know if that's going to be 6 months or 8 months or 12 months. And then, so keep that in mind. So I would need to somehow have a function with which I can perform regular just checks or inspections, as we call it in the system, on the condition of that item. And as part of that, I may need to record the operating units, such as hours or kilometers. And the same even goes for a car. Yes, we service our cars every 12 months, but if I do more than 50, if I do 15,000 kilometers in 6 months, I need to take it again for a service in 6 months. I would like the system to tell me it's time, even though it's been 6 months since the last service. So, and then I have inventory items on which I may want to check stock levels. The largest retail change in the world still do stock takes, because no inventory management system is perfect at managing stock levels, and that's why you do stock takes to confirm and check your stock levels. So our inspection module allows the user to check, do these inspections on whether it's an asset, whether it's equipment, whether it's inventory, to confirm stock levels, stock levels, things like mileage, running hours, etc., to capture images. So, good example is in capturing mileage, you may as well, capture an image of the vehicle's odometer, or so forth. Based on that, if I have on my maintenance of that element, if I have said it needs to be serviced every 15,000 kilometers, I obviously have a starting value. If the system now picks up in this particular inspection, which I can schedule for whether it's every week, every day, every week, or every month, it doesn't matter. The minute that the system picks up that it's now time, it's reached that operating limit, it triggers the work order, because now you know when. 6 months ago we didn't know when. It triggers the work order for the annual service, depending on how that was set up. And then along with the inspection function, and this is something where the mobile app becomes quite useful. It does geolocation tracking of that as well. So you get an idea of what assets are where, and is it really the same as what was assigned for this location. So without fitting tracking devices on these items, you already get to do a decent form of tracking.
This geological tracking can be GPS enabled, isn't it?
Yes, so that is so it uses if it's on a mobile device, it uses the GPS coordinates of the device. If it's on a desktop, it can trace the location to a radius not as accurate as on a mobile device, but based on the IP address of that desktop device. Okay, so bear in mind we can set inspections and checks for each of these items, whether it's equipment, assets, or inventory. When it comes to inventory, I can obviously register my inventory the same way I register assets and equipment, define my stock levels. I have a function to receive stock. I capture and upload supplier invoices. Other system users can issue requisitions, so request stock from my warehouse or stores. Stores would issue stock, and there's also a function to return stock. And then that obviously, all of these functionalities combined allow you to maintain stock levels for reordering as well. And then I think lastly, just in terms of assets and equipment, there's a fault report module as well. So it's just a function whereby someone can easily report a fault or an issue with an item. It can be assigned and notified, or a manager can be notified, or even an investigator. And then depending on what the outcome of that investigation is, that can then in turn trigger a work order for maintenance to be done on that item, and or a non-conformance. So if that fault was as a result of quality, poor training, poor documentation, it doesn't really matter. If it warrants, based on that organization's quality policies, that a non-conformance needs to be raised, There's a tick box when you log the fault, and that automatically schedules a non-conformance and sets in motion the quality management process that we were looking at earlier. And then lastly, in terms of work orders, so we have, I think for work orders, I'm going to skip it on this page and maybe just quickly jump across to the app just in lieu of time. So if I go to equipment, so we've done just the maintenance. We have a separate sub-module for that. So again, we'll see, useful dashboards, and we'll see open work orders, and you can group and sort them in a way that you want. I've explained the difference between what work orders are and inspections. Inspections are there to just do checks and perhaps trigger work orders if need be. Fault reports we just discussed and so forth as well. So these are just dashboards. It's just visual representation of the data that's in the system. But I think what I would want to show is in terms of assets and inventory registration. So I'll just go into a basic example. So again, this module is set up not just for laboratories, not just for mining organizations. It took a lot of design consideration to make it robust enough to be compatible to just about any environment. So in terms of the basic information that's captured, I'm not going to cover all these in details, but you'll just see that I get to choose what I am registering, whether it's an asset, whether it's equipment, whether it's inventory. Based on that, the form updates to capture information relevant to that item type, and so forth. We can see for inventory, I get to choose what inventory category that is. I can add new categories myself. I can select the branch that's linked to responsible persons. My stock details I can define. Current stock on hand. This is obviously on initial registration and so forth. Stock levels so that the system can warn me if I'm running low and so forth. There we get to our handling information, where we can start to acknowledge, if hazardous items. I can upload my safety data sheets, handling SOPs, and so forth. I can, if I have risk assessments on that, I can reference or upload that there as well. All these would then be easily accessible by the user. I am more inclined, if I'm on the workshop floor, to access from my device the handling procedure if I've forgotten about something than I am to walk to the quality manager's office with the hopes of finding that document. So it's making the information available is quite key. I can, like we said, then define inspections or checks, and it's not that you must. It's just it's an added feature. It's not mandatory, but schedule inspections for that particular item. How often it needs to happen, whether I'm monitoring hours, kilometers, quantity, it doesn't matter, and so forth. Okay, so and then this is just to initiate that process, and the system schedules as the inspections are completed. The system schedules the next ones. I think of particular note, just to perhaps move along. So, like we had compliance elements or templates that we could set up in terms of personnel competency and compliance, the exact same structure applies to equipment as well. So I can I can set up maintenance requirements. Okay, and again, no with no real limit. So I can set up a maintenance template to say the nature of, indicate the nature of the maintenance, give it a reference, whether it's internal or external, and so forth. Define my control limits, describe what needs to be done. That now becomes a generic maintenance template, which I can link as I register my equipment. So that becomes available for me to select and add to the maintenance schedule of this item, and I can link multiple templates. So and in linking that, I can now define, okay, for this item, this template needs to be applied every, let's say, so I want to perform the first item once a day. However, the second I would like to do, you know, every 12 months. And then I would commit that. And then the system schedules at registration. This is a once-off setup for this item. So then what the system does from there is it starts scheduling. Maintenance items are immediately work orders. So it's a work order that the system generates. It doesn't come from an inspection or a fault report per se. But I would then be able to see under my work orders. The system would, for each maintenance template linked to an item, system would create the work order, schedule it with a due date, and so what I see here is all my outstanding work orders. Down below, we see all our completed work orders, and again, this can be grouped by as far as. So we can see there in some of this data, so it's even groups them per branch, per department. And I can apply filters. If I'm at the Cape Town branch in the milling department, I would set a filter to only show me my work orders. And again, it's not just this isn't just a work instruction. I can then actually access this work order, again, whether it's from a desktop, a tablet, mobile device, and capture the work order information as is. Record the results if I have documentation to add as well, or if I've used consumables, I can link those consumables that reads from the inventory module as well. And then finally, acknowledging whether the instrument is, or if the item is operating within allowable limits. Barbara, I think we must maybe just look at rewording that just slightly. If it is operating within limits, yes, fine, the work order is closed. If not, it schedules the appropriate action beyond that. You can record labor costs and so forth. So it does cost tracking then on the individual asset as well. So you can determine the life cycle cost over time. And then again, on each particular work order, I can again add any number of attachments, documents, images, etc. It could be a supplier invoice for an external service even that would complement the costs that I've recorded as well. So that's standard with every work order. And then as the work order is completed and the system sees that this is a repeating item every 6 months for that asset, it would schedule the next item for 6 months down the line already. And this is just one way of viewing the outstanding work orders. It is no different to what we were looking at earlier on the maintenance dashboard. In this is just the same data in a calendar view, so it doesn't matter from which way you access it. Yes, I think we've. I mean, I can go into more detail, but I think that's perhaps not necessary for now, unless you know. I think I'd rather maybe just find out if there are any last questions on this module or any input from anybody.
Hi, sorry, another question. How does the inventory module interface into like a purchasing system like a Pastel or something like that? Can information be shared between the two or not?
At the moment, no. We can integrate with Pastel. We are doing that, for instance, on the LIMS module, where invoices are exported to Pastel, Sage Pastel. So it definitely has interface capability. There's no interface readily available, and something like that would probably be at an added cost of around, if I had to give a dollar amount to a quick math, probably between $4,000 and $6,000, depending.
Okay.
Yes, but you would, in terms of the inventory module, so yes, you would perhaps generate your order in Pastel, and you would obtain the items with the supplier invoice, and then you would receive stock. I'll just maybe quickly show you that. And now this is quite nice. So you get to receive your stock, link your supplier. We can capture your supplier information as well, even attach your invoice or take a picture of the supplier invoice as well, the same as your purchase order number. So this will ultimately become the link with your financial or external inventory system. You can also attach your purchase order, and then start capturing your stock. Now, what this does is it automatically updates the asset and the inventory register with necessary quantities. And in the case of assets or equipment, you just register them in a different section. This already pre-registers them. So as you receive your stock, the items are already registered. So you would already assign their unique numbers, and so forth as well, upload whatever information on it that's available. And yes, it's again less critical. I know it's especially critical for laboratories. Let's say not laboratories, but for ISO 9001 and ISO 17025 to, in your procurement procedure, ensure that if you've ordered items and you receive them, that they are checked for compliance as well. So the fact that it needs to happen early on, right after receiving, this already forces the user or the organization to log this item and capture all the necessary information and acknowledge whether it complies or not, schedule the inspections, and so forth. So it just makes things happen a lot faster than what you would normally have. Then perhaps just to end off, you can also obviously handle internal stock return or then stock returned to your suppliers, just for stock level management. Yeah, so that's feeding stock into the system. Aside from that, then from within your organization, people would make requisitions. So any user can make a requisition for, they can specify the kind of equipment that they need, the inventory that they need, that would be issued to the stores or the warehouse department to then fulfill. And that is how stock is then issued, and the system is updated beyond that. And then, as you can just see, lastly, is the system would tell you what if you have any inventory to order based on the stock levels. You can see on this item we are below the reorder level, so the system forewarns of that. And I think that covers the assets, instruments, or equipment and inventory module. I don't know if anybody else has any questions.
Yeah, I'd like guys, please let us know what you think of the system, if it's something that makes sense to you. If there's something which you thought maybe the system was about, maybe it's different from what you expected, or if it's something which you are as excited as we are about moving forward with it, you know. What do you think, guys?
So this is Rida from Morocco. I have maybe a question.
Yes.
So I wanted to know what the system offers compared to the competitors, if there are some competitors existing. So, for example, I want to sell the system to a laboratory. So, what are the arguments that I can use to support my system and say that this system offers these features compared to the competitors? So is there any specific or any precise information that I can use in this sense?
Avian?
Yes, Rita, valid question, very valid. Thanks for that. I think, you know, and you'll see I've just put up a value proposition slide as well. So you have to segregate to an extent. There are quite a few ERP systems in a global market that does, you know, handles asset management and inventory management and so forth. That we cannot contest. However, we've done some research, and the costs to have any sort of technical management functionalities and so forth, you've got to look at enterprise class ERP systems, of which the procurement and implementation costs are exorbitant. It's as you know, $100,000 to $10 million we found to get that level of functionality. You are then still stuck with systems developed on traditional platforms, meaning that they don't have flexibility to be adapted from one organization to the other, number one, and then secondly, to grow with the organization. That's in terms of, let's say, if we look at the asset and the inventory module alone. Now, some enterprise ERP systems have what they think are built-in quality management systems and LIMS systems. Now, quality management systems, flexibility is a big problem in competing systems. So we are not aware of any competing systems built on the technology that we've built it on, meaning that they wouldn't have this, you know, they won't enjoy the same benefits with being so flexible and scalable, number one. And then in terms of the maybe just to add on quality management, on the quality management module as well, if you look at I mean, any organization's quality manual has to grow. And all organizations want to go digital or paperless. So you have to have a flexible system. You want something that can easily be changed and grow with the organization. It cannot, even your basic screen layouts cannot remain stagnant. It's going to become a problem. In terms of laboratories are subject to accreditation bodies. So they are assessed every 6 or 12 months or so forth, and they are forced to continuously mature their quality systems in order to retain their accreditation. And that dynamic exists across the world. So again, you cannot be stuck with a system. If it's electronic, it needs to be able to grow and be adapted over time. Then in terms of LIMS, there are far less competitors out there. To give you an example, in South Africa, and I think it would be fair to say Africa as a whole, or let's say that would apply to Africa as a whole as well. In South Africa, we only have 2 competitors on the LIMS front, but they only have LIMS modules in their solution. Their customers still have to use other systems or manual systems to manage quality and to properly manage inventory, etc. So on the LIMS front, very few competitors, and we've even been working with some of the largest tech companies in South Africa, such as EOH, who approached us because they realized that their enterprise ERP system, what they thought was a LIMS module, was all but that, and it fell significantly short because they view the LIMS module as more a side module, and they don't build in the necessary business logic that's really required for it to be a management system for laboratories. And I think the best way to explain that to potential customers is, or for customers to realize, is that your financial system or your quality management system can be down for a day or a week or so forth, and it's not going to hurt your operations. However, for laboratories, the LIMS system is their operations. So it's not good enough for laboratories to opt for enterprise ERP systems that have a LIMS module, but the business logic or the way in which it was just developed as a side module and nice to have, whereas LIMS is as much a core of our business, and laboratories are as much a core of our business. So it's a lot more dynamic, and can be much better suited to organizations out there. That plus cost. The cost of our entire solution is, I would say, less than half of a competitor that only offers LIMS as a module. And the technology plays a big part in that. It's just a lot, it's faster, it's cheaper, it's just a lot more scalable, which is why we've done it this way. But I think this slide, which we'll share as well, this slide in particular explains a lot of what I was just touching on now as well.
Yeah, so Vian, I think if I may add as well, I think the other point as well, once there is a level of interest, is the fact that you can set it up to kind of run as a trial or as a pilot as well for the customer to actually see, because sometimes the proof is actually in the pudding, right? They need to be able to see and feel how the system works from a trial phase before the actual commit, right?
Yes. So I mean, it's nothing for us to, you know, takes us less than an hour to spin up a trial environment for a customer. I think the big thing we all perhaps need to take into account there is, as you can see, it's a massive system, and all systems require setup, and you only start relating to the system once the setup works for you. So I think we just have to, we try and be very cautious of just saying, oh, we can give you a trial system, and you give that platform to the user, but there needs to then be a process of at least helping them to do the basic setups so that they can assess the system. And also, to, you know, there has to be a hard stop to it. We've just, you know, because we just find that you give a trial platform to a user and they see, oh, I need to do some setups first before I can use it, and then they don't commit to it, and it becomes a lot more time intensive for you as a sales consultant, and you know, we see that for us as well. Because they keep you dangling on a line, you know, where they keep promising, oh, I must still test it, I must still test it, but they don't want to do the setup work and so forth. So it's better for, in the case where we have to provide a trial environment, that we get, let's say, the customer to somehow agree, okay, let's do it, let's help them with the basic setups so that they can make that assessment and make an informed decision and not need too much time for that.
Yeah. Also, in terms of value proposition, I think it's quite important for you guys on the ground in your various markets to find out what is out there. I mean, if this is, for example, is going to be in the profile of products you're going to offer there, you have got a better feel of what people are using. Now, in South Africa, one of the things we find is that people have got their own systems they are using, and those are terribly, terribly inadequate because they are not easily accessible. They normally are found in their IT departments, etc., etc. Or one or two people actually I spoke to last week, they're using one of our competitor, and they were just complaining about the cost. I mean, one lady said to me, I wish you phoned me 2 months earlier. We just renewed our license. Gee, we paid so much. The cost, especially. There's one big international company which is found almost in every country in the world. It's called LabWeb. Now, I'm not sure what kind of business approach they're adopting, but for example, one of the client they competed with us. They quoted the client 120 million rand, right, to buy their system, and then the client rejected it. And later on, they got the same job for less than 15 million. Now, how do you do that? That's a kind of corruption which unfortunately is very prevalent with international multinationals. But if you look at the value proposition we are providing to clients, and clients are honest with themselves, and I hope in terms of private sector in your various countries, they are not as sort of corrupt as the government sector is. The value is obvious. I mean, you can take whatever offering they have and put it side by side. If it's an in-house developed system, I don't think the competition is as strong as that strong. But if it's an international application like your labware, I think the only way you're gonna lose when you compete with them is shenanigans, you know. And you know, guys, one of the things I need to mention though, Patrick, is that I see the list of people who are attending today. There's only one woman, right? In our country, some of the most effective people are women. It's a woman who actually started our Zondo Commission. It's a woman also who's sending our president to jail. Now, we need strong women out there who will go out and be able to open up the markets in a fair and honest way for us, to be honest with you. So guys, yeah, we are really confident about the ability of our system to deliver value. And the competition is, and it's very cost effective. You can go online and check any system out there. We compete with all of them in terms of functionality, in terms of value proposition. But if we lose on costs, Usually in South Africa, it has happened to us a couple of times. It's normally based on shenanigans, which I hope our Zondo Commission has addressed some of them, you know.
Lucy, I just want to add as well on the proposition, and perhaps to, I think it was Rido asked, in South Africa, and you'll probably find that it's similar across the world. The majority of laboratories, and I'm talking about laboratories specifically now, or organizations with laboratories, are smaller entities. And when I say majority, I estimate 80% plus. I think we ran some numbers at one stage. Are small laboratories who physically cannot afford any of the competing solutions out there. So even in that, the value proposition is that 80% of the market haven't been able to afford systems such as this up to now, and our cost for this system is less than half of that of competing solutions that we've seen, even if they compete partially. So that is your. It's an easy market, you know, if you have 80% that need something but can't afford the majority of solutions out there, and we have something that costs less than half.
I think very clear, Vian. I think. Go ahead, Rita.
Yes, I just wanted to say that this answers the questions that I asked. So thank you very much.
Thanks. All right, Vian, I see obviously I'm kind of aware of the time. Anything else kind of that's pertinent that we haven't covered yet?
No, I can maybe just mention that we'll obviously share these slides afterwards, and I'll maybe just point people, for those that are maybe still unfamiliar with what kind of cycles or process we found to work. They can refer to the last slide, and you know, there we sort of give a basic breakdown of a basic sales and implementation cycle for the system, and it sort of, you know, indicates the various stages, the purpose of that stage, what information is required, how long it takes, and who's responsible for that. Because that's something that the end user would want to know as well. Okay, what's the process? How long is it going to take? What do you need from me? So that should serve as a guideline, and it's open for comment as well.
Okay, thank you, Vian. I think it's pretty clear. So I think what we'll do, obviously, in the course of probably early next week, is to share the slides as well as the link to the recording. And obviously, I think Baba will probably do that for us. And I think I'll obviously engage the team, obviously on this call as well, in terms of follow up if there's any other questions, and obviously the way forward in terms of developing the market.
No, sure. That sounds good. Thanks, Patrick. And
thank you, Patrick, and thank you to everyone who's come to attend it. Listen, guys, it's something which we are very excited about. We've always talked about extending our solution to the rest of the continent. I don't know, when Vian showed you the slide, we've got the Royal Swazi, Sugar Swazi as a client. We had a couple of clients in Namibia. Unfortunately, they had a problem, those guys, with some kind of economic issues, etc., etc. So, and we have actually, long time ago, we used to have a client in Zimbabwe, but that was killed off by the Zimbabwe transformation, which happened in the early 2000s. So, yeah, our solution is very, very much suited for our sub-Saharan markets. I'm not sure about the Saharan market, because I think countries like Morocco and maybe to a lesser degree Egypt or something, they rely a lot on European standards. In fact, I laugh because I find that Morocco at one stage applied for membership of the European Union. I thought that was quite hilarious. But anyway, so that happens sometimes, that you use different areas depending on your proximity. I'm sure Egypt will probably use maybe Middle Eastern standards. Libya, Morocco, and I don't know what the other, Algiers, whatever, will be using. Maybe I don't know which are standard, but whichever standard they are, our systems are very responsive to whatever standards your country has, and we can actually be able to look at whatever you have.
Yeah, fortunately, just to add, the ISO standards apply globally. So especially in terms of the LIMS module, the quality management module, and I mean, an asset is an asset. So I don't foresee much deviation in requirements.
Yeah.
Okay.
So in the same focus, maybe one last question. Did you guys thought about the languages? For example, I'm talking from Morocco and North Africa. They are speaking French. So did you thought about adapting the tool to other languages, or does this already exist? For example, using the tools in French.
Oh, Rita, that is a fantastic question. I love that question, by the way. Patrick, I'm sad that you never raised this issue. The original system we had on LIMS was provided in both Afrikaans and English in South Africa. So I am more than keen to have our system translated into French. That I think is something we are definitely going to look at, Rita. I think that's a fantastic thing to consider, yes. Because I mean, the two main languages in Africa is unfortunately English and French. So yeah, it's something we have to look at. So if you get a client who says, yeah, we're French, we want French, whatever, and they are more than happy to look at our system, we're more than happy to work on translating the system into French. I'm very keen on that, certainly.
Okay, thank you, Vusi. Any last comments? Before we close? Yeah.
Nothing from me. Just thank you to everybody for your time, and sorry it went a bit longer. It's always tough to keep it short while going into detail, but really appreciate the time and the engagement.
Thank you. I'll be in touch with the rest of the team. Thank you, guys.
Great. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you,
guys. Thank you very much for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay. Bye.